The SNP's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, is due to say, when he speaks at a conference, that people in Scotland are sick of being told what to do by the Conservative government. Well, joining us now from Glasgow is Michael Russell, MSP. He's the Scottish Government Cabinet Secretary for Constitutional Relations and a former Scottish Brexit Minister. Mike Russell, let's jump a few hurdles and let's suppose that Scotland does become independent, does become a member of the EU. What sort of border is it going to have with England?
Well, a very porous border. If the UK really does want to have a free trade relationship with the EU, then there'll be an excellent free trade relationship with Scotland. That's what we all want. I mean, I have to say, I was laughing to myself in your previous bit about entering a free trade pact with Japan. I mean, this is just nonsense, complete and utter nonsense. And for that to be talked about seriously by people who are Brexiteers just shows that they have lost contact with reality.
No, but it's a serious question. If Scotland was independent and in the EU, you say a porous border, so what you're saying is there would have to be a border. There wouldn't be freedom of movement as there is now.
Well, of course there'd be freedom of movement. There is a established travel area in these islands, which is not even at risk in terms of the Irish travel area, and that's absolutely clear. But the reality of this is Scotland needs things like freedom of movement. It needs people coming into the country. What it does not need is to leave the EU. And we've put forward endless ideas, endless compromises, and none of them have been accepted by an intransigent Prime Minister who is heading for disaster. I mean, when you hear the discussion you're having about the detail of the arrangements, this is the first country in recorded history that's trying to negotiate a way out of a free trade arrangement, a way out of all the things that actually work in terms of our business and our commerce, and a way out of things like environmental regulation. Look at the first item you've had on the news about the environment, about global warming, and consider that what most Brexiteers want is to be able to remove the UK from the EU system of carbon trading. That would be immensely damaging.
Yeah, well, of course, what the Prime Minister says is the SNP want to condemn the dwindling band of Scottish fishermen to permanent membership of the common fisheries policy. She says coming out of the EU will get them out of that.
Yeah, well, she's not telling the truth. I mean, unfortunately, and that's not unusual for the Prime Minister, she is not telling the truth. The only group of people she ever talks about in terms of Brexit in Scotland are the group of fishermen. We do not support the common fisheries policy. We have always thought it should change. The people who refused to change it were generations and successive generations of Tory governments. That's the reality. But I also represent in Argyll and Bute quite a large number of fishermen, inshore fishermen, who are really worried about the trade relationships, who are really worried, for example, that the live langoustine that they sell into Europe will not be able to go through, given the chaos that exists at the present moment. So the Prime Minister talking about Scottish fishermen is partial, incomplete and wrong.
Yeah, but nonetheless, when we come out of the EU, we will be out of the common fisheries policy, and you don't think that's a policy which you support. So that's one up to the Brexiteers, isn't it?
No, I don't support the common fisheries policy, Adam. I've just told you that. I've just also said that the SNP
but if you stay in the European Union, you haven't got the choice. You're stuck with the common fisheries policy.
Well, I'm afraid that's not true. The common fisheries policy needs to be reformed. Everybody knows it needs to be reformed. An accession from Scotland would be one of the occasions to reform it. To actually base this entire thing on the hatred of the common fisheries policy is also incredibly foolish. Look across all the sectors in Scotland. University research, 25% of the staff are from EU countries. Look at hospitality, look at aquaculture, look at agriculture. Is anybody seriously suggesting that all those things should be damaged in the way they're going to be damaged because the Prime Minister wants to misrepresent the SNP's position on the common fisheries policy? It is as nonsensical as the rest of it.
OK, well, let's talk about how the SNP uses its power both at Westminster and elsewhere. The immediate priority, if there is an agreement with the European Union, and people are now optimistic about between the governments, is going to be this meaningful vote in Parliament. What are SNP MPs going to do in that meaningful vote?
If the proposal is in any way short of continuation of the single market and the customs union, then the MPs have indicated, and I support them in this, that they will not vote for it. That's the right thing to do. Scotland actually voted to stay in the EU, 62% to 38%. A vote tomorrow would, I think, produce a larger majority for staying. There is no mandate for our MPs to vote to remove Scotland from the EU. We've offered the compromise of single market and customs union membership. If that compromise is not in the final deal, then I cannot imagine that we would wish to support any further step by the UK.
The problem with that is that could potentially be a vote for no deal and crashing out next March, which wouldn't particularly benefit Scotland, would it?
Well, we don't want there to be a choice between a no deal or the Chequers deal. That's an artificial choice. There need to be a range of other choices, and most people agree with that. There are Tories who agree with that. The Labour Party has...
We're talking about reality, though. The reality is the choice in a meaningful vote is going to be go with the deal that's been negotiated by the government or no deal and crash out. That's the choice, isn't it?
Adam, you don't... No, Adam, you don't know that to be the case. According to the House of Commons, it's meant to be amendable. That was agreed. That was a compromise that got us to this stage. An amendable resolution can have other things in it. But there is absolutely no way that we are going to enable Brexit, because Brexit is a disastrous option for Scotland. And it's very important that you and many other people recognise that. It is a foolish thing. Scotland did not vote for it, and Scotland does not want to be part of it.
No, but this is where it gets interesting, because, as I say, potentially, if the government deal comes back with the deal and it's voted down, we could be into hard Brexit, which is where we come to this amendable area. And you are saying, what, that the SNP at that point would try to do what? Hold the whole process up, have a referendum in all of the UK again? What would you propose? Sorry about that. We've lost Mike Russell there, but I can promise you I will be in Glasgow tomorrow. We'll be able to pick up on those discussions and talk about independence as well. Special live 2-hour all-out politics from the SNP in Glasgow tomorrow, ahead, of course, of... we'll just go back to Mr. Russell, sorry, we were interrupted by the technology there. I'm just saying, if we come to the point that we're looking at amending the meaningful vote, what's the SNP going to propose then?
Well, one of the things that could happen if there's no prospect of getting a proper resolution is to suspend Article 50, to sit down and to say, what do we do next? Another one is to have the so-called people's vote. Actually, that's not a second chance. What it is reflecting on the chaos of the last 2 years and the incompetence of the Tory government. There are a number of options, but certainly it is not simply a choice between Chequers or no deal. And the Prime Minister should not be allowed to present it in that way. That is a false dichotomy. We won't accept it.
So it is wrong to say, as is being reported in some quarters, that the SNP might support the government in exchange for Indy Ref 2 on Scottish independence. Is that right?
I cannot see any circumstances in which the SNP would essentially enable Brexit. That is the wrong thing to do. There is a compromise on the table of single market and customs union membership. We've proposed that for 2 years. It is the sensible thing to do. Anything that departs from that, in my view, would be disastrous for Scotland and could not be supported.
Even if it meant another independence referendum. So how do you get to the independence referendum you want?
Well, I'm talking to you about what happens in the next 3 months. I'm also saying that we would support a people's vote, which the First Minister has indicated that's the case. And in those circumstances, when we know what the possible outcome of this tortuous, appalling process is, that's the time to say to the people of Scotland, what do you want? Do you want actually this nonsense of a British Brexit put together by the Prime Minister in a way that does not have Scottish support? Or do you want the normal status of a small independent country within the EU, like most of the other countries, succeeding because they cooperate with others on the basis of pooled sovereignty, not on the basis that we presently have in the UK of an incorporating union, which doesn't work, but on the basis of an equality of people working equally with each other. That's a choice. That's a choice we'd like Scotland to choose. But I have to say the United Kingdom government have made such a mess of this. It's difficult to know precisely when the details of that will be known.
But we're talking about before the Holyrood elections, most likely in any transition.
I think it's very difficult presently to know, but my firm view is it is not the when of this that is important, it is the why. And the people of Scotland need to stand back, have a look at this, consider what has happened over the last 2 years, and make an informed choice. And that informed choice needs to be informed by what the final deal is.
OK, Mike Russell, thank you very much indeed for joining us.